Hi, everyone. All right, good morning, good morning. How's it going so far? Good? All right, excellent, excellent. Are you as warm as I am in this room? No? Medium? Okay, all right. Well, I was standing right over there. The heat vent is right there, just in case you get cold. It's right there. 'Cause I was standing there earlier, and oh my gosh. Okay. So, to start, my name is Robert Gordon. I'm a program director at American Public University. I do reverse logistics project management. I have a doctorate in project management. I've kind of been, have several books published regarding project management. Um, I also have been a practitioner in the field of project management for about 20 plus years. I've been involved with companies such as Crystal Cruises, Disney Cruise Line, American Classic Voyages, Viking Cruises, and so I have seen a lot of projects, particularly in the maritime side. I did do some work in manufacturing. I've done some consulting as well. But I just wanted to welcome you here for this session. To start, I was kind of curious on how many people here are project managers or have been project managers in the past. Excellent. All right, good to see, good to see. How many people are members of PMI? Okay, all right, well, a great organization. I've done some work with them. I've done some publishing with PMI. So take a look at PMI.org. It's if you're as a project manager and a practitioner, they have a lot of great information, tools, and things for project management. So does anyone want to share like a little bit about project management, what fields, so I kind of get an idea of what industries you guys are in? Mine's primarily construction and maritime. Research and development. R&D, okay. Information technology, R&D, management, systems analysis, computer science, okay, all right. So kind of a different spread there of different things. Heavy IT, but that's not surprising. It's always good to kind of know your audience and kind of get a feel for where people are at, particularly with project managers. I feel that a lot of times when you have experienced project managers, they kind of already know a lot of different things and tools, so it helps kind of give me an idea of how to focus things. Okay, kind of the purpose of this presentation is to kind of help explain what's happening currently in project management with regards to artificial intelligence. I don't know how many people are starting to utilize it, if at all, but it's certainly a growing area as well as growing in the field. We'll also talk a little bit later about what the future holds, or at least what my predictions are and what the research has guided me towards. I'd be curious to see if people agree, disagree, or kind of see other things that are happening. I see that there's a huge technology impact on project management currently. So for anyone who is kind of like involved in project management, keep an eye on all technologies. I feel that the different technologies that are out there, aside from artificial intelligence, is really going to be changing the landscape of what project managers do and what they do in the future. Okay. Going back to kind of PMI, I see that the move towards artificial intelligence is important because it goes toward that goal of Project Management Institute to make sure that projects are on schedule and on budget. So I see that artificial intelligence has the opportunity to help projects in that regard. And in some cases, it already is helping organizations in that regard. So I see that those areas of current application are going to be discussed in the first part of the presentation, and then we'll talk about what the future holds in the kind of the second part of the presentation. Okay. All right. I kind of outlined a little bit to start. Any questions? If you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand. Ask. There will be a question and answer at the end, but if you have something burning that you want to ask right away, just jump right in and put it forward. Okay, let's see if I can get this thing to go forward. Oh yes, wow, all right, technology. Okay, there's a lot going on in artificial intelligence, and the key areas that I see that are happening already, you see with decision making, big data is already being crunched, and artificial intelligence taking a look at patterns throughout the data in project management, but in all fields. And I'll talk about some of those other fields because as you see what's happening in other areas, they will start applying to project management. Okay? There's already the use of virtual assistants. Everyone has a smartphone these days. You can talk to it. It can come back with information and artificially generated data or help assistance. You can ask questions of Siri, Alexa, Google. Some of us even have these kind of virtual assistants in our home. And I see that this is something that is going to help the project manager just moving forward. I've seen applications like that in the classroom where I've seen where a teacher will supplement their own education and experience with a virtual assistant like that and have students ask questions of those virtual assistants to kind of, if they need definitions or basic kind of information like that. I also see that there's a lot of movement in the autonomous vehicles that applies to AI. That kind of technology doesn't necessarily impact project management directly. However, when you start seeing project management in general, and in my side, which is construction, automated vehicles are really going to change the landscape of transportation, logistics, and construction. Because the more that that technology is being used, the more that it's going to be kind of creating efficiencies. And also, I will also interject from time to time an international perspective, because I know that self-driving features in the United States have not been embraced as quickly, and there's multiple reasons for it, as well as legislation and laws. But other countries, for example, in Australia, already have automated trucks going to and from different locations. They are limited application when it comes to mining, so they have automated trucks that are picking up ore and then moving it to a processing center and back and forth. And they have been in operation already for years. So there are some applications outside of the United States to keep in mind. Another one that comes up is automated grading. Being a professor for many years, having artificial intelligence help that. Helping grading is important, it's interesting, is helpful. And we'll see some applications of that in project management, because you'd say, well, you know, how does grading anything really have to do anything with what's happening in project management? So here's some examples that have already occurred with machine learning and artificial intelligence in other fields, particularly in healthcare. There was a recent study of ovarian cancer patients, and it was found that patients that were utilizing beta blockers for blood pressure lived 4.5 years longer than the other group that did not. Now, this was discovered because there was a massive database of patients' data that was crunched, and they were looking for any kind of indicators to see what was helping people survive longer or what treatments were helping. But this was an ancillary find. This was something that when they were initially looking at the data, this is not what they were expecting to find. But since it was such a very large group and there was a large amount of data, it showed that there was clearly a great correlation in here. And in fact, it was something that caused more study and more research. And even when they were discussing it, the researchers said, it was very interesting to do it this way, because it opened up doors and opportunities that they weren't necessarily looking for. And it wouldn't have been possible without the use of artificial intelligence and looking at all this data, because they said no one who was involved with this study thought this was even something that was on the radar. So it never would have been researched. There hasn't been research in this area done before. And so it was a finding that I felt was very interesting. And it kind of goes to tell you what you can do at large data and when artificial intelligence is looking for patterns. Okay? So, small patterns really can lead to some interesting knowledge. Another AI application in accounting is the scanning of invoices. There are organizations that have already gone in and utilized AI to scan invoices to start processing data. So information would come in, some optical reader would read it, and then kind of take that data, put it into the system automatically. My personal experience with that was there was a company that was an early adopter of that kind of technology and process. I was brought in as a consultant to find out how efficient that was and what was going on, because they had seen that although they were using it, the efficiencies that were promised by the provider weren't happening. So they wanted to find out what was going on and what kind of went off the rails there. So in my analysis and review of that, I found that it actually was the people. People were a little resistant to use it. People were a little reluctant to want to abdicate that that process to someone else. And with just a few key people not leveraging it as much as possible, basically they were keeping it from being as efficient as possible. And it was keeping it from being something that would be a helpful tool rather than just another process. So it goes to kind of to make me think like, okay, well, moving forward into project management, now we have a situation where maybe project managers aren't going to be so happy to embrace this new technology because they see it as a threat. Because after speaking to the people, they had concerns that their jobs might be cut if this project was too successful. And so they consciously or unconsciously were not letting the system do everything that it was capable of doing. And they would purposely manually do the input because they said they could get it done faster rather than let the system learn and then become efficient. So by denying the system that information, they were kind of slowing that progress, and that's why the organization. So it took some time to kind of get them re-educated to try to move that forward a little bit, but it kind of made it clear that just because this technology can be helpful doesn't mean that everyone's going to jump out and embrace it and want to use it effectively. Okay. Also, AI is used, on the commercial side when it comes to detecting fraud. I don't know about the rest of you, but like pretty much every once a month, because I travel, I'm going to get a call from a credit card company, or I'm going to get an email, or I'm going to get a text that's going to say, "Is this charge yours?" And a lot of that processing now is being kind of sent to AI to take a look at it. It's not really a person that's looking at these transactions. It's AI that's taking a look at it, and then suddenly you'll get an alert. Again, that's something that's is happening now, and just consider it, just for the future, think about that, getting an alert every time something came off schedule or something was a little bit off task. AI can detect these patterns and detect what's supposed to happen and then make people notified. Okay? Another application that I saw in AI that's currently being used is that some companies are utilizing it to monitor transactions to find out compliance to policy, which I thought was an interesting thing. For example, would be, okay, well, let's say an individual was supposed to use a company credit card for certain charges but not others. AI could monitor all those transactions. Usually that's kind of a manual or a double check system where someone else is checking the transactions, but AI can do it much more efficiently. And then again, so I see that that's important. Same thing in application to project management. Again, if processes are in place and you see some deviations, artificial intelligence can monitor the data and help audit and see what's going on. Now, of course, it doesn't mean it's foolproof, and it doesn't mean that it's something that we want to take too far at this point, but it's just something to be aware of, that technology is out there, people are doing it, and I see the application to project management. Okay. The current applications I see in project management directly are regards to decision making, risk management, scheduling, and planning. Those are the areas that I see that there's a lot of opportunity with, because again, decision making in particular, just a project manager is going to take all the data that he knows and utilize it and leverage it, and then come to some kind of decision based on the circumstances. Okay? And then to take it one step further, future application of artificial intelligence in project management, I see that there's the potential that one day there will be artificial and intelligent project managers, and that a computer or artificial intelligence would be running a project. Okay? Have I scared anyone yet? No? Okay. Okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it can go off the rails, but also, it could. We'll get to it a little bit more, but again, there's a lot of potential out there. Yes. Yep, I will. I will go through these next. So no worries. I haven't haven't gone off the rails yet. But we'll go through each of these particular areas, and then we'll talk about the future. It's kind of like the setup. So, okay. So let me move on in decision making. Okay. As I'm sure everyone knows, AI has defeated chess masters for a couple decades now. So it shows that, okay, well, a game that, very strategic game, that AI has been able to perform at that level. What's interesting is a little bit more recently, in the last year, the top human Go grandmaster, and I'm hoping everyone knows the game of Go. It's a Chinese game, thousands of years has been around, longer than chess. Much more complicated than chess, but simpler at the same time. Easy to learn, hard to master. The top human master lost 2 out of 3 games against AI. And it was interesting because some of the points he made after having the sessions and playing the games against AI, his first comment was very telling, which he said, "My opponent never makes mistakes," which is very interesting. And from a game that you're planning ahead and strategizing, just like you do in a project, when you have an entity that you are competing against that doesn't make mistakes, it certainly makes it very difficult to win. And, again, makes for a formidable opponent when you're there trying to compete against an entity that has probably greater experience or knowledge on the game and data. So it's, again, the other point that came out of that interview was that the artificial intelligence was able to go through many scenarios and look at many possibilities as the other person was making a move. So once they made the move, then they could even make more predictions about the future. Probably more. Yep.
What about a circumstance in which the objective is not competitive, where you're trying to reach the best design option? Does AI assume competition, or is there always an end of it?
Okay, I will talk about that a little later, but I will tell you something about AI when it comes to application of non-competitiveness when it comes to the automated vehicles. Right now, the main design thrust is making automated vehicles, autonomous units, and it's the vehicle that does it. I see the next generation as being networked vehicles, where vehicles will communicate and collaborate in order to avoid accidents. Because if I know what the other driver is going to do, their next move, I can plan my move. If I don't know, I'm going to make my best guess at what I think they're going to do.
Yes, these future possibilities are finite. Mm-hmm. And that's a very important distinction between that and a self-driving car. Mm-hmm. In your competitive work
Okay, we can't hear you.
in chess, the future is all, it's a finite space. It's finite possibilities going forward.
In chess, there's a finite number of futures, and you can search them, and you don't even have to do what we call AI to explore that space with every move. It's a very different situation with a self-driving car, and there's public safety involved. And having spent a few decades in trying to get AI into safety critical applications, the thing that we get hung on is verification, being able to trust that. Are you going to get into that?
We'll talk about ethics, which is kind of what I see that falls into that area, because there's what you're saying is, okay, how is it designed? And later on, and I'll just share with you now, is that the car manufacturers, for example, have made it clear that the program and the AI that you're utilizing, the primary objective of that is to protect the driver or protect the vehicle, protect the individuals in the vehicle. which doesn't necessarily coincide with the decisions that a human would make given the circumstances in an accident, you know.
Well, we hold our automated systems to a higher standard than we hold the human driver.
I'm not clear on that,
Yeah.
but what I'm wondering is, who do we hold accountable?
Yes, yeah.
Because-
accountability is important.
Yeah.
What I mean is that the problem we have with trusting AI in safety critical situations is that you don't always get the same answer with the same inputs. And this is an important test in terms of safety critical software. You want it to be totally predictable. Well, people, you don't always get the same answer either,
Right.
but we'll trust people sooner than we'll trust computers, I think. But let me let you go on with
I don't know. I see a gentleman here who's. No, you want me to go? Okay, all right. I wasn't sure if he had questions, but okay, okay, all right. So let's see. Where was I? There he was. Okay. So again, it's in supporting in decision-making process. We've talked about some of the decision-making processes already. For the moment in project management, because we're still kind of in the current situation. I will talk about the current situation on AI is reviewing data to see patterns, leveraging that to make decisions, offering information to humans, to people for that kind of data. No different than, for example, your AI unit, AI phone could help with scheduling, offering recommendations. You already see programs like Google will tell you, okay, if you plan to go someplace that will be closed by the time you get there, it will tell you that it's going to be closed by the time you get there, so you're sure you want to go there. So again, helping with decisions, making suggestions, based on the available data and information. And then I also see that artificial intelligence is going to help leverage brainstorming sessions. So if you're actually utilizing, information from artificial intelligence or big data, that will help in your decision-making process, and could be kind of like another set of data to look at. Okay. Now at risk management. AI is already being utilized to start taking a look at large databases for patterns. Again, risk management is important in project management to determine what risks are available. And as we all know, as a project manager, you're supposed to check your archives, check prior data, check prior projects and historical to find out, what best practices might be helpful, what could be useful to that particular project, what risks should be examined, what risks should be treated. Now, I also know, being a project manager and knowing project managers, that's not necessarily the easiest thing to do as an individual. That means going back and looking in archives, looking at other people's reports and data and projects, and having that all done. Not as easy as it looks. And what's more important and what frustrates project managers is that when they look at that data, they want something that's related to their project, something similar. And if they're looking at just all this other data, how is that helpful or how does it apply? So as a person, you tend to filter that out. But with AI, it can go through those large databases and find those patterns, find what's relevant, be able to determine what's actually going to be helpful as part of the project. So I see that's where it's very helpful. And you already see this with large databases being analyzed and being reviewed. It's just one of those things that I see that project management can get help on, and because it means examining large amounts of data, artificial intelligence would be helpful to filter it down to get you kind of those nuggets that you want to use for your project rather than go through, reports and reports trying to find the ones that are relative. So that's how I see how it's already applying to risk management. I see that you're going to see this more and more in projects. People are going to take those archives because the best practice has always been to maintain your archive. I also see that organizations will collaborate in the future with these archives to have even larger data sets to examine projects. It's all about finding those patterns and artificial intelligence being able to find those patterns and make recommendations. So Any questions on that, on risk? I know there was some. Okay.
Do you have some examples of where it's using risk on?
I've seen organizations that have kind of taken the data and crunched it to see, what's going on with it. Beyond that, I've not seen any other large-scale examinations of that. I've seen organizational level do the analysis. I think there should be more, and I don't know if anyone else has seen any examples other than that. Because I feel that as a project manager, I don't always have a lot of time for risk management. So sometimes if you have a risk manager on your team and you're a large enough project, they have a history and they have the time to do that. But as a normal project manager, risk management doesn't always get treated as well as it should be, and it doesn't get treated as regularly.
Problem with risk management is, as we discussed before, I think I can hear it better. The problem with risk, hello. I don't know how to do this. The problem with risk management is that it is unpredictable, and the range of possibilities is unlimited, and things that can happen that create risk may not ever have happened before.
Right.
So that your database may be distracted. Rather than trying to analyze the risks of the circumstances as those circumstances exist. Relying on analysis of past, could set you up.
But in a case like that, AI would do at least as well as a human would.
All right.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
In risk management, you have to look at mathematical expectation, probability of each event times its cost or its benefit, and figure out which is the best mathematical expectation of your choices.
Given his observation of history, being at least as good a predictor as dynamic term analysis,
Right.
what would you suggest is true? If your analytical process depends on past data, things that have happened, and analysis of that circumstance, rather than human beings doing predictions based on current circumstances, current interactions, preferences of existing individuals who are playing in the process. My bias is not included in any historical analysis. The presence of the fact that I'm in the index could screw it all up.
Well, the kind of the example I can think of in my own personal experience has been, and this is when I teach in project management, I try to make this clear, is that I've built a lot of different series of ships. And the first one's always the hardest and has the highest risk because it's never been done before. But for me, as a project manager, I know the risks that come with that at the beginning and the first, be it the first building, the first ship. That applies to any first after that. I don't necessarily have to say, well, I built a cruise ship, but maybe if I built a tanker, they wouldn't have the same kind of risk. Well, yeah, you have the integration risk, that exists. And you have systems that need to communicate, and the minute you start adding too many variables in, the risk gets higher. And that's on the first ship. Because once it's built and it exists, then other people can look at it and say, oh, this is how they made it work. Right or wrong, and then people then go, I can make that better because that looks like they kind of just made it work, but why not be efficient?
In your existing and changing universe, and the circumstances that affect that first process makes every process after that a first project.
Okay. Okay. All right. Well, I see your point. The other thing, kind of going back to that situation, or that I think where you're coming from, is that, and I comment to this to my students when they bring up, something pre-internet as a source, and I tend to challenge them and say, well, is that really relevant anymore? is the payphone relevant anymore in society? But maybe it could be something regarding the human condition, or maybe about relationships. So has that changed?
Climate change, exactly what you're saying. That's what made me think of it.
Could happen, yeah.
Climate change is controversial. People agree climate is changing. The question is how much and how fast and what are the costs.
Then you get into those type of events, what do they call them?
This is not a project.
I know we're digressing a little bit, but okay, all right. Well, let's keep going. I'm like, okay, I know people are getting passionate. That's good. I like that. Okay, but I think we'll stick with project management for now and tackle the rest of the world in the next session. Okay. Okay. Artificial intelligence and planning again. This is important because the project managers should be leveraging as much as they can with artificial intelligence with regards to planning. I did some research, and about 50% of the project manager's time is being spent on administrative tasks, meaning doing reports, possibly following up, scheduling things, working on things like that, rather than being more engaged with the project. Yeah, well, that too, or needs to be able to delegate, which is another thing, again, with project managers. Some of them have a little bit more control issues than not. But anyways, be it as it may, whatever that percentage may be, in the end, I think that it should be lower, and a lot of this could be done by some kind of artificial intelligence assistance to help with scheduling. There are already programs out there that are actually ones that assistants that can do, the full scheduling, and basically you're dealing with artificial intelligence that sets up meetings and then coordinates everybody to sessions and sets it up.
Clarify what you mean by schedule issues. Schedule issues of the people working the project, or schedule issues of project elements and integration?
Okay, you mean, okay, it's right now I see it as just scheduling, but I think you are moving towards resource management, which I think is something that will happen in the future. I haven't seen elements of, it exists, okay.
Actually told you that's all.
Okay, all right, well, then there you go.
And you mentioned risk assessment, but schedule risk is a huge problem, and our blindness is a culture to it. When you were talking risk management and education before, were you scheduling, like, you're calling it resource management?
Yeah.
Part of it? Part of that, what you call risk?
Well, okay, resource management can be a risk in a project depending on the project. I've seen projects where if you have finite resources and it's going to be drawn to other projects, particularly in a program, is where I see it's a bigger risk, because now you may have shared services that are now going to be competing for different projects, and the timelines don't necessarily, the timelines could end up where, there's 1 week where you need 80 hours of resources, and the next week you need 10 because of that competition by multiple projects. So I see it as something that is possible to work with artificial intelligence. I see that it's, I'm being told that yes, it's happening to some degree. Yes, you can do it in a Microsoft project, and you can schedule resources that way. But getting it more driven by artificial intelligence, I think, is something that's the next page. I don't think we're quite there yet. Okay. And then with regards to risk, I think that another important thing there is I think artificial intelligence not only can help identify risk, but it can also help treat risks. Meaning, if you have it crunch the database on what risks were identified and what treatments were used, it can then make recommendations on what treatments are useful against certain risks. And it can also, depending on how effective it was, can give you a range of effective risk treatments, which then can, obviously be very helpful to a project manager if you know, okay, these are the optimal risk treatments for a particular risk. Well, then why not use those? Why are you going to go and try something else? Of course, as we've mentioned, the project could be unique, so there could be other variables involved, but, at least from the data, having those recommendations is, in my opinion, always a good start. Okay. Another one is with regards to budgets. Again, obviously, one can take a look at budget data and analyze that as well. One can get a feeling for what kind of, what level of budget was effective, what worked, how much things cost. All that analysis is useful for a project, particularly from the initial planning stage. Now, let's talk about that for a moment, where now you're the project manager and the project hasn't started yet, but now you're going to have to forecast forward your budget on what your resources are going to be needed, the team that you're going to need. Having AI help guide you through that wealth of data that's available can be very helpful, and I see that as being something that will be developed more in the future because it will help that top-down budget that typically happens with a project from the beginning. So, a lot of times when an organization is going to bid on a project to do, they're going to say, okay, well, what's our forecasted budget? What do we think it's going to cost? What are the different major elements and what the costs are there? And if you have all the budget data from your prior projects with similar elements, you can get a better forecast after adjusting for some variables such as currency, exchange rates, how long ago how long ago was that budget done? How long ago was that target reached? So I see that as all things that are being currently done in project management, however, not necessarily as effective as they could do. I know some organizations are better about crunching their data with budgets and looking at forecasts and kind of coming up with general data from a top down. But I see that a lot more can be done and make it more specific. So now here's where we get probably more controversial. Okay, I see the future as being something where AI is going to become like the what I call this concept of the 24-hour project manager. And some of these things, as opposed to a human project manager, AI doesn't sleep, AI doesn't care about time zones, AI doesn't take a vacation, AI keeps looking at alternative scenarios. Systems do break down, I agree. Yep. And people take sick days, yes, they do, It's something that I see as possible for the future. And then we don't worry, we'll get on the ethical and determine how humans are still involved and what's going to happen. Because much like autonomous vehicles, doesn't mean that they're 100% successful at their task. Even currently, autonomous vehicles require a human driver to intervene, and there should be mechanisms to make sure that they're paying attention and they're monitoring and they're involved in the process. So that's the question. But I do see there'll be a time where there will be a project manager that will be either replacing, but at the very least supporting a human project manager. Because of all this opportunity, everything we've talked about right now, if we take it to a little bit more advanced level and more data, it's going to happen. And we kind of see it already, with other bits of technology. And of course, it's going to depend on how much the human project managers want this, Kind of years ago, I always kind of thought, and this was kind of one of my personal predictions that didn't quite work out that way, was that very early on, I could have taken the path to be a computer programmer. Chose not to. Many of my colleagues, in high school and college took that path. They all became programmers because I had this theory. That, well, there should come a day where computers will program computers. Seemed a reasonable assumption to make. And I thought, well, if that happened in my lifetime, I'm going to have a really short career here. And I really didn't think that was maybe necessarily the right direction to take. Turns out, nope, not true at all. But part of that is also because of human programmers not necessarily wanting to relinquish that. I've seen a lot, again, back to those human people that were trying to avoid working with AI because they were afraid to take their jobs. Well, I'm sure human programmers to some degree think that, well, if you program computers to program other computers, that's going to
Now, computers have been programming themselves and other computers for decades. Basically, what you need is humans to define what you want the computer to do. In the beginning, it was you were writing in assembly language, it took thousands of lines of code to do a little thing. And then computers learned how to take more higher level instructions and turn that into code. And basically, it's going to the point where people only have to tell the computer what they want it to do. They don't have to tell it how to do it. And that, so it is, computers are programming themselves.
One definition of machine learning is computers programming computers.
I want to go back to the program management and the 24-hour program management. I think one of the important parts about program management is building a team of people to go off and accomplish what you want to do. And I don't see this 24-hour program manager accomplishing that. I see that it would do the project. I see that what it would do is kind of monitor schedules, monitor the various kinds of things that you've gone through and give all of that information. But I see that the real heart of building a team is still going to be people.
Okay, I agree.
Yeah, I'd like to comment on that, but I'd like to hear what else you have to say before I do.
Okay, no problem. You know, again, you know, there are, you know, there's still, again, so, you know, here we are. That's where we are. Let me kind of continue because we kind of started talking about this a little bit. And then, you know, when it comes to ethics and who's to blame when that 24-hour or that automated project manager fails. You know, so the question there is like, okay, when the project fails, who's then to blame? Is it the project manager? Is it the artificial intelligence supporting the project manager? Because as you bring up, you kind of built a team, and if that person's part of the team, then the question is what kind of human oversight is going to be required? You know, are there, what kind of issues happen with this? Kind of in my opinion, when it comes to this, I see that artificial intelligence, and kind of to your point about building the team there, it kind of, I see like, it's almost like there's going to be a point where there will be competition within the creation of artificial intelligence because there will be specific elements that you'll want to create, meaning, for example, one company may start working on a risk manager to assist you with risk in artificial intelligence. Another one may then want to automate your procurement management and supply chain. And I could see where you have this AI, what I'd call like an arms race, as companies seek to perfect an artificial intelligence in a particular field or specialty. You know, would it seem unreasonable to believe that you could have an AI that would run your accounting system or your accounting processes? Because again, those are known in finite elements and there are rules of accounting that must be followed. So the minute you turn it over to an AI, it could be much more efficient with that. It would follow the rules. It would not try to embezzle. It would not take vacation. I hope. Of course, that depends on the programmers because, again, we have seen where people will program almost anything if they can somehow take something from someone else. So, and that kind of goes also back to that programming. I want to point out that not too long ago there was an AI project, and I don't remember if you saw it when it hit the news. They opened it up to the public so the public could offer it information and data to help it learn. Well, found out that some people decided that they were going to teach it not really nice things. And it learned those things rather quickly. And they shut down the project because they went, wow, you know, if you allow the wrong data into it, it's going to learn, you know, those things, and it will just continue on its merry way in that belief. Humans do it too, I know, but.
There's a story about a Peace Corps volunteer who got really annoyed by management or something, and he was somewhere in Africa, and the ambassador from the U.S. was going to come to visit his village and talk to people, and obscenity is the proper greeting for an ambassador.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, same thing for small children. You know, never say words you don't want them to repeat around them because that's the word they'll remember. So, you know, so I can see, you know, again, it's going to be careful about the data that goes. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you talk about ethical situations there. What if you see that the artificial project manager is going to do something that you don't think is right, and therefore you don't follow that path? And then maybe there's two kind of branches. One, you were right. The other is that you were wrong. The artificial intelligent project manager was better. What happens then? I mean, there's a lot of very interesting issues here.
What if you leave out the word artificial intelligence and say you question the project manager?
Right.
Same issue.
You just can't punish a whole development machine the same way that you can a human.
Yeah, you shut it down. And
Interesting point. You say you can't punish them, but then can you reprogram them?
It's the same question about self-driving cars. In that if a self-driving car causes an accident that takes the life of a human, is that justifiable in that they are still safer than humans, but we can't say, oh, we can't put the blame on a person the same way because it's a machine.
I'm curious as to why the word blame is coming up. It seems to me that it's every mistake is an opportunity to look at the design and the represent and all that. So
I see it as because every organization that builds technology is very concerned about being sued.
being what?
Sued. That there'd be litigation against them for the creation they made because it caused something wrong to happen.
And it was a mistake.
And it could be a mistake,
In
yeah.
that case, there's no blame.
Well, okay, let's say, take an example.
Accountability is probably
A better, more neutral word is accountability.
Accountability.
Who's held accountable?
Right,
For,
right.
in theory, punishment was supposed to change behavior. So is reprogramming. Same thing.
Yeah. But to your point, when it comes, okay, let's say there's, and this is from my personal experience with ships. Okay, on board the ship, they're going to have a program that's going to be determine stability. So, for example, if there's a collision or an accident or otherwise the ship has lost integrity and water's entering, this program is supposed to help you keep the ship up. Well, let's say it was programmed wrong and it makes a wrong decision and the ship sinks and there's loss of life. Now, I get it. It was programmed wrong and maybe something inside the program wasn't right, but now people have perished. They were on a ship. The program is at fault because maybe, the people didn't do other things fast enough. They just followed what the program was telling them. Now what? Now what happens? Who the people who've lost loved ones are looking, for something, closure, remuneration. And who then is to blame? What happens then?
you have those 787 Boeing crashes because of the sensors and the audio.
Yeah,
So you
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, that's the equivalent situation.
Exactly.
77.
Absolutely, yep.
But in this situation, the equipment caused the accident because it didn't adjust as it should have.
But then
And the ship, the question I have is, would the collision have caused the demise of the people absent the technology? And so the technology created in us an expectation of a more perfect universe. So we created a situation in which people could die
Right.
more freely because we had this technology,
Right.
and the technology didn't work. Right? So
Yeah,
that's a different situation.
So let's take it back a bit. Titanic hits an iceberg.
Boom. Yes, it did.
Boom.
It did hit an
Accident.
accident. Well, yeah.
Well, now what? Who's to blame?
The blame the technology, the technology.
Well, no, I'm saying there's no technology to blame, but then there's still going to be blame assigned. There was still a trial after that to determine what happened.
Was it the captain, was it the shipbuilder who
Right.
didn't make the ship strong enough?
Yeah.
Will
But there was
it
an
be the
expectation.
programmer?
There's an expectation, yeah.
Of it being unsinkable, that
Yeah, it was marketing of that thing was.
So in the AI situation, if that happens, does it go back to the person who was actually programming the computer
Well,
that gets the blame for this?
that's
And that hasn't been happening.
has not been determined yet. I've
No.
not seen a case, and if anyone has seen the case where they've determined who's to blame, I've yet to see that.
Nimrod,
Nimrod?
the British aircraft,
Okay.
they put engineers and program managers in jail.
Oh, my goodness.
Okay.
In the UK.
For, it
For
was,
negligence and development.
A lot of the time you need evidence of negligence or like where they knew that a system would not work and then they put it in anyways. Like a lot of the time you see that with like car companies, if they know something's faulty in the car, they release the car anyways, then they get accountability for that. But the engineers, if there's something that if you can't prove that they knew about it, then you can't really blame them for it.
And with the airlines, there were signals that there was a problem, that the
Yeah, people
airlines had
knew,
ignored.
and
Yeah.
plus Boeing, who
Yeah.
they knew that there was an
They knew.
issue with this, but they ignored it and didn't tell the guy.
all right.
In any accident that I've ever, dumpster dive, and there's been quite a few in the aviation space, somebody always knew something somewhere. Somebody was always trying to raise an issue somewhere.
So like Columbia,
Columbia and Challenger.
Challenger.
Columbia was particularly interesting to me personally because the people who made those decisions were people that helped recover from the Challenger accident. And I sat in rooms with them after the Challenger accident. We all agreed we would never make that mistake, right? And these are really good people, okay? I cannot demonize them to this day. They made a mistake. So, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay because again, you know, the question there is that since artificial intelligence is going to be a human construct, and we as humans can be good people and still be flawed or make mistakes, and there are true accidents, are we going to be holding that artificial intelligence to a higher standard? Are we going to expect it to not make mistakes? Are we going to expect it that it's never going to do the wrong thing, and it will always be perfect, given the infinite number of possibilities? So, I'm running out of time.
So you have an answer? Keep going.
Okay. Well, I'm close to the end, so you know. Okay. Again, will we always need a human in charge for project management?
Yes.
Okay. We'll see. I hope you're right. I hope you're right because I love the field.
Okay, I'm old enough to remember elevator operators.
I could be over here.
Yeah, you are. But elevator operators, remember those?
Yeah.
They had the wheel on the
Is that
side?
generator car, please?
Yeah, when they first introduced push-button elevators in commercial buildings, a lot of those buildings kept the elevator operators in place because some people wouldn't get onto an elevator. And they needed somebody they could blame if something went wrong.
But that's not what
Today that sounds silly. 20 years from now, not getting onto an automatic vehicle or something is going to sound equally silly. This idea of requiring a human supervisor every place is going to sound silly.
Also, the reason they kept elevator operators was because the union wouldn't let them fire.
That was part of it.
Yeah.
That was only a part of it.
So again, and I kind of see this as this overarching concept that you need to have a human in charge to override to deal with the variability and complexity of the potential futures that could happen.
And the purpose of the system is going to be human-driven. Its purpose.
Yep.
How can you have a system that operates in human context without a human participant? Who's making the rules? Who's deciding stuff?
I forget, that there was a science fiction story where everything was automatically piloted, and there was a human there and one of the goals of the computer was to keep human from doing anything.
Oh, okay. The factory of the future, which will have two employees, a man and the dog. The man to feed the dog, and the dog to keep the man from touching the machine. Okay. So, again, what does the future hold here? Again, will there people need to be in charge? Again, artificial intelligence is only as good as the data it has. The information it's given. If the information is incorrect or as the term is used now, fake news, that could potentially skew what the artificial intelligence recommends. Okay? So, having said that, artificial intelligence is only going to continue to proliferate in the world. The question now is, what does the future hold? Some say quantum computing is going to really help artificial intelligence. I suspect we'll see more predictive technology. I know there are already military AI drones that are out there in development, if not already testing. There are rumors that I've not gotten substantiated that China's already using predictive information to control their society. Again, it's a possibility that could happen. I think that artificial intelligence is going to change the nature of projects, whatever applications it ends up being, be it in a limited sense or in a greater sense. I see that we're going to see more networked AI. I see that there's going to be the power of connecting different AIs together, to work together, to learn together.
Do you think that those dynamic systems will evolve different value systems?
Yes, because I see that large corporations are going to control their own proprietary.
I mean different value systems inside the system. I don't mean value systems external. So
Yeah.
we have a value system. There was a value system in which the AI was developed.
Think about the corporate culture at Microsoft and Amazon and Facebook.
Yeah.
And imagine if any of those companies were to create an artificial intelligence for some application.
Yes.
Wouldn't it hold the cultural norms of those organizations because the programmers would
Which is the point I'm getting to.
Yeah.
Which is fundamental, because when you set up a machine to program itself, you set up a value
You
system.
build the stuff in.
You may not understand what you just did, but you did. So what you're saying is key to this whole
It's the whole dynamic of change and how artificial intelligence is done. Because you program it in a certain sense, which then includes, and has an effect on the.
It's going to be controlled by, I think, the entities that create the artificial intelligence.
There's a movie that came out at least 45 years ago called Colossus, the Foreman Project. And you really ought to see that. I think it's available on YouTube.
What's it called?
Colossus, the Foreman Project.
SLRVIN.
Right.
Any other questions?
I think this issue is really needs to be upfront.
Yep.
And, and part of the contextual situation in which we discuss artificial intelligence, that it is created and stuff is built in which replicates, and as error is repeated and repeated and repeated, the dissonance between the intelligence and the circumstance is increasing.
Right.
And we are replicating that mindset without realizing that mindset is being replicated.
You just defined education.
All right. And speaking of which, there'll be go on.
Yeah, I want to bring up a point which is relevant to that lady.
Okay.
But the thing, I've taken project management classes and I've lectured on project management. And one thing they all seem to have in common is they're not talking about management. They're talking about scheduling subcontractors. That's what project management is. They talk about work breakdown structures and Gantt charts and risk matrices and stuff like that. They don't talk about management. The definition of management is getting work done through others, which means getting people to work. It means building a team. It means working with people and working with people. Now, I was a project manager in R&D. which means I was not getting subcontractors to do things. I was working with individuals. Most of the time, we were doing something we'd never done before. Sometimes we were doing something, as far as we knew, nobody had ever done before. And the idea is you have to somehow get the people in there, get them on the project, get them being productive. And do you have any idea where AI fits in on that? Because project management classes don't talk about that at all.
Okay, when you start talking about management, it gets a little trickier because now your artificial intelligence would have to be able to predict what the human will do and how to approach them. And although you could maybe program some of that, I'm not sure. Now, there is some study and research, and there's another session this afternoon that I'm a part of, which is AI and teaching and education, which is kind of what we're getting into. Is like, okay, well, AI is being educated by people, just like people are educated by people. And so, you know, what is that bringing for the future? Because, you know, education is what the instructor is bringing value to the student. And then is the student then going to take that information 100%? Are they going to apply it exactly?
Just comment on the people thing. I mean, it's possibly, like in the end, AI really depends on what data you capture to sort of feed any algorithm, right? And so if you actually maybe start capturing data on individual performers and sort of their productivity, and you might be able to say, oh, this team of people work well together, and if you add this person in, their productivity drops, and that way you might be able to inform your management, but that's just a random thought of how I think.
And just a random comment, I think the last slide. In 20 years, there will probably not be a single job that can't be done better by a machine than by a human.
Interesting prediction. Interesting. Okay.
I just have a comment. It seems like we have these enormous expectations with AI perfection, and we still haven't solved or come up with maybe boundaries or delineation for ethical concepts without this, much less. So I find that leaves us at a lack of who's going to blame. Is the attorneys going to win, or is it going to be public policy, or the corporations going to win?
But I think you get at the core of the problem that ethics have not been defined in society yet. And so how are we now going to apply ethics to our construct when we don't even have a definition? Okay. I know it's 11:30, so.